and I'm going to pass it around to the group. You can find these pictures on Google Images or whatever, but it's pretty easy to find. Anyway, I'll describe them. They're very simple little pictures. So this series of photographs, series of drawings, because they were created in China, I think around the 9th century. So that's pre-photography. So these series of drawings are very famous in the Zen tradition and actually in other traditions as well. Like we went to the Academy of Religion conference, which has about 10,000 people a few years back. And there was one of the panels was presented by a Catholic guy who was talking about the Oxfording pictures as representative of their spiritual path. So this series of photographs has been very evocative for people over the centuries. So what it is, it's a series of 10 pictures that show the progression of a practitioner trying to engage and learn about practice and about finding their true nature. So it's presented as a sequential progression, but I don't think we should think of it as a sequential progression. And I'll talk about that as we go along. Because most of our experiences in practice, after a certain point, we kind of know the drill, and it's really a matter of applying the practice. And because as human beings, usually the things that we're working on are not immediately cleared up as we deal with them once, because most of us have some rather ingrained issues that continue to pop up. So we may have to continue to revisit those over and over again. So I think it's a good way to think of this as kind of like a 10-lane highway that we move around on, depending on which lane we need to be in. Having said that, though, I will say that I think the first 5 of the pictures talk to us about how we get to that place of being able to fully use the 10-lane freeway. So the pictures describe our maturation as practitioners. And if you look at the pictures, you'll see that the initial person is a young person. And then at the last picture, it's an older person. So it also shows this maturation through those pictures of the aging of the person who's doing the seeking. Okay, the first picture is called Looking for the Ox. So the first picture has to do with, when we start out in our practice, we're looking for something. And usually we don't know exactly what that is. What we're looking for is an end to our suffering. And so maybe we're reading books, we're doing philosophical exploration, maybe we're going to different religions, we're doing, going to different religious centers or talking to different teachers, whatever. But we're kind of looking around for this thing. But actually, we don't know what that thing is that we're looking for. It doesn't really have a name. And even if we have a name for it, probably our name for it is not really, or ideas about it is not really actually what it is. Certainly that's true in Zen. So in the first picture, what we see is this young person wandering around in the bushes, really, just kind of lost, thrashing around in the bushes, looking for something that they haven't quite able to articulate. In the first picture, what they're looking for, we don't even see it. So that person hasn't even understood what it is that they're looking for. And they think that whatever it is they're looking for is outside themselves. And in Buddhism, in Zen, we talk about how all beings are Buddha nature. Everyone already is endowed with Buddha nature. But having said that, there's the doctrine or the teaching that everyone is endowed with Buddha nature, and there's the belief or the faith or the realization that you actually are endowed with Buddha nature, and furthermore, that everyone else is. So that's kind of tough, and we have ideas about what that is, which get in the way of us actually realizing and understanding what it is to talk about having Buddha nature and Buddha mind. So in this first picture, this person is really just banging around. Does this sound familiar? You know, I remember in my 20s, I kept journals in my 20s, and a few years back I was reading them and I thought, wow, I just spouted all this wise stuff, you know, that I had gotten out of books and things like that. Could I practice any of that? No, I was totally screwed up. So it's like I'm reading that and I thought, but some part of me recognized that wisdom that I was trying to connect with. Some part of me really deeply understood that there was some truth there. The problem was I couldn't do it. I couldn't enact that because my, problems, kleshas, immaturity got in the way of being able to actually embody this wisdom that I was attracted to. So this is this first picture of looking for the ox. So you don't even really know what it looks like, but you're busy looking for it. And that's a good thing. So the second picture is this person sees like these tracks of the ox kind of going off into the bushes or whatever. So here, the practitioner is getting a glimpse of what it is. And so it's called seeing the tracks. And there's kind of humor to these first pictures because the guy's running around, and they're always portrayed, of course, as a guy, but we can let go of that and remember that any applies to anyone, women, men, transgender, LGBTQ plus A, whatever. Everybody's going through this process as a human being. But I love it because he's running around with this rope stuck out in front of him, like, okay, I'm ready to capture this thing, you know, when I find it. So he's following these tracks. Now, you know, we see this path and we see the tracks of the path and we think this path is appropriate for me. I would say that sometimes we see tracks and we follow them and it's actually not a very good thing. Like it's not a wholesome path. Maybe we get caught in conspiracy theories. Maybe we get caught up in a cult of some kind. Maybe we become attracted to a teacher that is actually a pretty narcissistic person. And so we can all think of examples, like extreme examples of what happened down in Ghana, where I can't remember the guy's name right now for some reason. Help me. Jim Jones. I mean, that's an extreme example of people following the tracks off into the wrong direction. But in the context of these ox herding pictures, these are the right tracks, and this is what it is appropriate to follow. So in the second picture, he's seeing the tracks. So that's a good thing because he's been looking around, or they have been looking around, and now they actually see tracks that they can follow. Now, the third picture is called seeing the ox. So now, after following these tracks, this person actually sees the ox. But what they see is the back end of the ox. So they're not even seeing the whole ox, and they're not even seeing the front of the ox. Basically, this ox's butt is hanging out of the bushes. And so, but they have sighted the ox, and they're very excited, and there they are with their noose, you know, trying to find this ox, connecting with the ox. So you see the ox, and this in some ways is kind of a reward for our faith, right? Because our faith that the ox even exists our faith that we can go looking for this thing, this wisdom, this path, this part of ourselves is generated by the self's faith in the self's ability to wake up. We don't think of it that way usually, but isn't that true? I mean, if we didn't already innately have that in us, would we be able to even feel those feelings of wanting to find some way to alleviate our suffering, find some way to connect with some deeper wisdom? So this is great. Now we're seeing the ox, but there's a problem with seeing the ox, which is the ox is not particularly cooperative. So we've seen the ox and we're kind of learning to trust ourselves. And we're waking up to our delusion. And so we kind of keep going with this. Now, in the fourth picture, he's actually caught the ox. So now he's got the ox with a rope around its neck. And he's got this very large being that they are trying to tame. And the good part is that you know, they've got the ox, but the bad part is the ox is not cooperating. So this ox, of course, is also part of ourselves. The ox is not separate from who we are. And so here it would be that, you know, now we understand the teachings. Now we've actually got something substantial to work with. So we've captured this on some level, but you know what? It's really hard. Practice is really hard. This part of our self doesn't want to do practice. It's like we know what the practice is. For example, we know that maybe we ought to apologize for something. We know that practice tells us that, you know, yeah, if something's not working out very well, chances are good that we might be part of the problem, but we don't want to be part of the problem, partly because if we're part of the problem, then it's a lot of hard work to have to deal with the fact that we might be part of the problem. And so then what do we do? And also because it brings up in us this sense of defensiveness, which is, I don't see myself as part of the problem. Therefore, I don't want to have to give up my sense of self as being right in this situation. Does that make sense? Like, I'm right, therefore I shouldn't have to apologize or even look at the possibility that I might be part of the problem. So that's the ox that isn't being cooperative. That part of yourself is like, no, I want to do the practice. I want to end suffering. I want to do all these good things, but you know, I actually don't want to do the work. And I don't want to do the work because the work is hard, and also because the work kind of messes with my sense of self. And my sense of self is very precious to me. And you know, I really don't want anybody messing with it, including myself. So we get really attached to this, and that's why practice is so hard, because you know, we read a text like the Shinshu Roberts, and it says, you know, the way is easy if you drop your likes and dislikes. Oh, thank you very much. That's really great. I've got the ox. I've got the Shinshu Roberts. How come it is that I can't drop my likes and dislikes? So, and by the way, how do you find out that you have likes and dislikes? Usually because you've got the ox and it's not cooperating. So I think this attaining the ox is an interesting state for all of us. While we're going through this part, you know, I think it's hard. I think there's suffering, and we may bring suffering upon others. That's why it's good that in the Sangha, we have a Sangha to practice with each other, and that we have teachers. Teachers in Sangha are not mentioned, are not shown in these 10 pictures, but they're quite important. So, all right, so, you know, we get the ox. Now we're not sure we want the ox, but you know, the thing about it is that we can't let go of the rope. So there we are. In the Shinshu ceremony, we say we're like a mosquito biting an iron bowl. I just can't let go of this. So here we go. Now we're on the way. So the fifth picture is called herding the ox. So now we see the person leading the ox, and the ox is actually following. But the thing here is the ox isn't actually tame. The ox is willing to go along with this. So we still have to stay on our toes. And so we know what our practice is. We know that the practice is hard to do. But at the same time, we've got some handle on it. We're working with it. And we have actually at this point know pretty much what we're going for. Like we know that maybe we're going for cultivating generosity, equanimity. We're working on things like studying the doctrine of non-duality and how is that the genesis of compassion. We're working on these kinds of things, impermanence, et cetera. So we have all of these kinds of practices and theories that we're trying to enact with ourselves. The sixth picture is riding the ox home. So now the practitioner is sitting cross-legged, usually on top of the ox, playing a flute. And the rope is gone. And by the way, this person also had a whip. The whip is gone, the rope is gone. The ox seems to be happily trotting along the trail with the person sitting on top of them playing a flute. So, hey, all is well, right? Life is good. So I would say that these are the times when we're actually able to do the practice without any hindrance. We're able to do this. Now, I think from this sixth picture here, probably to the end, is where we start kind of going through those lanes on the highway. So at that point, we really are solidly grounded in our practice. We have some grasp of what it is that we need to do. We have the resources and the tools to do it. We have ways of kind of deconstructing what it is that we're doing that's not particularly helpful, et cetera. And we are willing and want to do it. And sometimes we can do it in particular situations, or often we can do it. But then there are other times where we get caught. And that's where I would say that that kind of go back and forth between these states. So I don't see this as some kind of progression from you start here and you go to the end. And then after you get to the end, there's no problems after that you don't have to revisit and practice with. The seventh picture is called Forgetting the Ox, and the person remains. Okay, so now the picture shows the person sitting in a hut in the mountains, out on a porch, looks like. And they're sitting out there and they're viewing the moon. There's no ox in the picture anymore. And they've reached the state where they've fully manifested their true nature without likes or dislikes. So completely able to engage this realized response. And they're very satisfied with where they are, which, by the way, is an indicator that we have probably still got work to do if we think that what we're doing is really wonderful. And it's like sitting out on the porch with a cup of tea or a martini, looking at the moon and, you know, really rocking out on all of this stuff, right? So usually that should be an indicator that at least maybe there might not be any work happening right now, but there probably will be something in the future. So we're pretty satisfied. We're not struggling. But we're not relating to the world in this picture. We're out in the woods in retreat, if you will. So this starts a series of pictures where it's interesting because I think that what it's talking about now is a kind of internal work that's going on that is in some ways not relational to the kind of hustle and bustle of our lives. It's not it's not about our relationships to others per se. I think it's about our relationship to finding some equanimity and centering, and maybe even what this is a kind of meditation practice. So I'm not sure. I have to investigate this more to really come up with an idea for myself about what I think this is about here. But so the eighth picture is the person and the ox are forgotten. So in the eighth picture, what you see is a big circle with nothing in it, right? And so maybe that's the full moon, which is, the full moon is usually a symbol for complete realization in Zen. No ox, no person. So one of the commentaries I read said, absolute and complete unification. There are no traces of ordinary and sagely beings. Both sentient beings and Buddha are empty of inherent existence, empty of inherent being. So we can see all of that. There's no words, there's no language that's necessary, and there's no kind of mental clinging or desires. You're just completely presencing. So I think that realistically, this is probably a meditative state. And then, and also I haven't said this up to this point, but the ox herding pictures are a visualization of the Bodhisattva path. So the Bodhisattva path is not complete until the Bodhisattva is engaged in the process of, as we say, saving all beings, or in the process of helping to alleviate suffering in the world, not alleviate suffering for the self while sitting in some kind of samadhi state, right? So from this perspective, the eighth picture and the ninth picture, the seventh picture are incomplete, because what they're describing is a way of being that is not the total maturation of the Bodhisattva path, but a necessary aspect of our spiritual development. I think, yeah, so I think that in our school, we don't push so much this idea of, in Soto Zen, this idea of having these kind of deep samadhi experiences of oneness. So that's not something that we put a lot of emphasis on, partly because I think that in Soto Zen, it's viewed as a kind of trap that you can get caught in, of trying to replicate that, you know. But I think many practitioners, not saying that if you haven't had this experience, it's, you know, a bad thing, but I think that many people, and also people have these experiences as children where you feel the sense of oneness. You've had that experience of what it feels like to be in this state of, without objects, a state of feeling like, okay, everything is completely manifesting itself. And then the ninth picture is just a picture of nature. So it's just nature, no practitioner is present, no ox is present. So this is this complete integration of surroundings. And looking at the commentaries, it's this sense of being present in your world in a way in which the self and ideas about practice and all of that ideation has dropped, and you just accept this world as it is just now. So from a kind of practical point of view, we have to accept our experiences. We have to accept the world just as it is manifesting, with all of its warts, etc., without likes and dislikes. And then when we can do that, we can actually respond to what's happening in a way that's going to be skillful. Because if you are caught in likes and dislikes about something, then you're going to try to push it in a certain direction that takes away your ability to see it in a kind of neutral way. When we can see things in a neutral way, then we're more likely to come up with actions that are going to be an appropriate response. Does that make sense? So that, I think that's what this is saying here, is that when you're just accepting things just as they are in your life, and this doesn't mean being passive, but accepting your life as it is and the things that are going on around you, then you can respond in a way that's helpful. And the 10th picture is called Entering the City with a Gift, Bestowing Hands. So this is the maturation of the Bodhisattva path. And it shows a fairly rotund person, like Hotai is usually, I think that's the Hotai is, you know, when you go to the Chinese restaurant or something and there's the fat Buddha with the you know, people put coins on and stuff, that's Hotai. Hotai is a Zen master who went around with a big bag of toys and stuff and gave them away, and kind of like a little bit like Santa Claus. And he was I don't know if he was a real person or not, but he embodies this kind of generosity, jolliness almost, this way of being in the world that is helpful, very helpful. And I think that the bigness of him, like the big belly and all that stuff, is probably has to do with a kind of prosperity in practice, not like he's sitting around eating and drinking himself silly, but a representation of being able to have this body that holds this. And in the picture of the ox herding pictures, you can see this guy, you know, he's big and got his big bag of stuff and all these things. So, but I think all of those are representations of having so much to offer to the person in the other person in the picture, who's much smaller than he is, and who's a beggar, who's considered to be a beggar. So this is that person who's really struggling and really suffering. And I don't think we should see this as the kind of pejorative words that beggar comes up for us and things like that, but just the sense of, in a sense, when we are really suffering, we are begging in a way for relief. So this way of saying, you know, please, can you help me? Please, can you bring relief to me? And this entering the city with gift bestowing hands is to come back into the kind of craziness of life, come back, putting ourselves back into and engaging and being able to actually offer something at this point, because we're able to see what's happening in a way that allows us to respond in a mature way. So this is what Dogen calls the parental mind. The parental mind is not the mind that we often stereotype of the parent trying to force their teenage kids into doing something because they're wiser than their kids are and they're going to make them do something. The parental mind is more like, I really want to see you thrive. It's that aspect of the parental mind. I really want to support you and love you and see you thrive and meet you where you are and trying to figure out what it is that's the best thing for you at this moment. So this is the place where, when we are functioning in that place, this is the high level bodhisattva. This is what we mean by saving the world. And the bodhisattva, we'll say the bodhisattva is of this world, but not in the world. And what that means is the bodhisattva is very much, because the bodhisattva is not different than us, the bodhisattva is very much of this. We are all the same. We are not separate from. A bodhisattva is not separate from. And the bodhisattva is not caught. So you say of this world, but not caught by this world. So not being caught by all the mishigash that's going on around us, not being caught by our own mishigash that's going on in our heads. And that's hard to do, right? So then there we are, having caught the ox, and the ox is not cooperating. So that's where we find ourselves back in that stage of this, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now? How do I best do this? How can I drop my likes and dislikes in this difficult situation that I'm struggling with in the middle of all the craziness that's going on in our world? The difficulty in my own mind, and maybe the difficulty I'm having with this other person. So then we're back with what are the precepts? What are the tools that I have to be able to address this issue? And there you have it. My understanding of this today is my understanding today. Thank you very much.